Now that we've looked at some of the general principles behind multi-resolution objects inside of Modo, we can jump a little bit more into the actual use in sculpting. So here I have a simple plane that's been divided up into an 8 by 8 grid, and when unsubdivided, we're looking at 128 triangles, and then when put into subdivision surfaces, we're looking at just over 2,000. All right, so let's hop on over into the Paint tab, which is where we have our paint as well as our sculpting tools. Now, we'll look at paint tools a little bit later on, but you should know that anything that you do with the brushes inside of the sculpting interface will apply almost directly to painting as well. So how you can modify and adjust brushes for sculpting is pretty much the same thing that you'll do when you're painting as well, except with sculpting we'll be working with mesh detail, and with painting we'll be working with texture detail. All right, so here I have my basic mesh, and I'm going to go ahead and just turn on the push tool. All right, so with the push tool turned on, you can see if I right click and drag, I can set the size of my brush, and here in this paint interface I can also set the offset percentage, which is going to be how deep the sculpting strokes will cause the surface to be changed, and then also the step percentage, which is the distance between the individual kind of stamps of the brush as it goes across the surface. So you can control this right here in order to make your strokes more subtle or stronger, and also to make them smoother or more spread apart. Now you can see here by default multi-resolution is turned off, so I'm going to go ahead and turn multi-resolution on. And just as a refresher here, remember if I click and drag here on the surface, you can see that I'm just getting control over the actual vertices that are in the surface. But if I turn multi-resolution on, I now have control of a much finer level of detail. So if I click and drag here, you can see that not only am I pulling the actual vertices around, but if I zoom in here and look at this, you can see that we're actually working with those implicit polygons. So you can see since we're only at a subdivision level of 2, this is still fairly faceted. All right, but we can use this now to be able to sculpt in more and more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that first stroke here, and I'm going to start just by creating a couple of strokes across the surface, kind of at the resolution limit of this subdivision level. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to follow across the same stroke here. So you can see that here at a level 2, I'm not getting too much faceting at this kind of brush stroke size. You can definitely see a little bit of the triangulation through here, but it's not overly broken and faceted looking. So as we increase levels of resolution, we'll gain access to a higher resolution of those implied polygons. So I'm going to go ahead and just click up, and this now takes us to level 3, and we can see here that our OpenGL count is up to 8,000. Now, if you're working on fairly modern computer hardware, you should be able to go up to over 1 million polygons fairly easily. So I'm going to go ahead and just step up a couple of more times. I'm going to give it a second to calculate each time just to make sure that it gets each one, because as you get to the higher numbers, you get up to 100,000s or millions of polygons, it will take a couple of seconds for the mesh to be generated at that resolution. So we'll go up again, we're up to 130,000. Remember, each time we increase, this is going to quadruple. So I'm going to go up again, and now we're up to about 500,000 polygons. So let's have a look at what kind of detail we're getting at this level. So I can zoom in here pretty close, get a right mouse button to get my sculpt detail. You can see the stroke that I create on this surface is fairly smooth. You can see if I get in here at a good angle, you can start to see some of the actual polygons in here. Right, but out here you really can't see them at all. So let's zoom in just a little bit more, because what I want to look for here is actually causing the resolution to break down. And there we go. So it zoomed in this far, I can now actually see my resolution limit. So working with 500,000 polygons on this level of detail is going to give me something that breaks down when I get in that small. All right, so let's go up again here. So now we're going to go to about 2 million polygons, a little over 2 million polygons actually. So you can see that this part already has smoothed out, and since we're now dealing with essentially quadruple the geometry, now if I go over that same stroke mark, you can see that I can actually do something at that resolution level now, although we are pretty much at the limit. You want to kind of try and keep your sculpting at the level that you have your geometry set up. Okay, so now that we have this fairly well established, we've got something that's pretty dense here, so it will give us the ability to sculpt pretty well. Let's look at some of the other options that we have for sculpting. So to work with the actual sculpting brush, I can right click and drag to set the size of my brush, and then left clicking and dragging will actually lay down the sculpted stroke. Now if I hold Control and then click and drag, it will invert the stroke. So the push brush pushes polygons, or these implied polygons, along the direction that they're facing. So it pushes them outwards. So holding Control will just kind of push them back in. So I could just click here and drag, and then hold the Control key and click back and drag, and you can see it's indenting that back in. So regular click pushes out, Control click inverts it. And now if I hold the Shift key, and this is true of any sculpt tool here, holding the Shift key will actually give me access to the smooth brush. There is a specific smooth brush, but since it's also mapped to the Shift key by default, you really don't need to go to that too often. So I'm going to make a nice bigger brush size here, and you can see I can pretty much smooth out any of the geometric details that I've made. Now this is especially good if you've made a stroke that either has a bit of faceting because the mesh isn't dense enough, or if you just made a stroke that you need to go back and adjust and make a little bit more fine-tuned version of, you can use the smooth brush to kind of wipe that away and get back to where you were. All right, so that's your basic push brush. You have kind of tri-functionality in that brush, and that's going to be true of these other brushes as well. So the next brush is the clay brush, and this one will just kind of allow you to build up layers on top of your geometry. So as I keep adding extra strokes across here, we'll see that I'm just building up, and this is kind of like the idea of adding more and more clay onto our sculpted surface. So just like with the other one, if I Control click and drag, you can see it's taking that away, and again if I Shift click and drag, you'll see it will smooth it all out. Okay, so the clay brush is nice if you want to build up some areas that you want to add some more detail to. For example, here if I wanted to go in and let's say I wanted to create some more levels of detail in here, I wanted to just add in something. You can see that I've built up this surface here, and it's like I've added more to work with. So then I could go into something like the push brush. Now if I hold Control, I can kind of click and indent this back in, and you can see I can go in multiple directions here, so just push that back on in there. So you can see that allows you to build up extra bits of your mesh in order to work with them. Alright, so moving on, we've got the smooth brush that we've looked at. The carve and the scar tools are going to be fairly similar in how they work, but there's a little bit of variation, and these are basically going to allow you to kind of cut into the geometry. See, that one just kind of cuts in. It's in a way very similar to the push brush, but inverted. And then there's the scar tool, which actually has something else added on top of it. So if I go for the scar brush right next to this carve one, you'll see that there's a distinct difference in how the brush is treated in the way that it terminates on the inside. You can see that with our regular carve tool, we're just getting kind of a trough created. Like I said, it's kind of like a negative push brush. But with the scar tool, it's actually kind of pinching in towards the middle. And that's because it's also got something on top of it that's working very much like our tangent pinch tool, which actually, let's jump down to that one right now. What the tangent pinch tool does is allows you to take the entire radius of your brush, whatever your brush stroke is, and it will just pull in towards the center of that brush. So you see if I go through here, see the way that it's just pinching this surface kind of closed, and this will allow you to do two things very nicely. It will allow you to sharpen up details that you've created, and it will also allow you to refine them. So as I go back and forth over this this stroke, you see that I can kind of continually refine the curve that I've created. Now, as a side note, this works all right with a mouse, but it can be very beneficial to do this kind of work using a pressure-sensitive tablet because you can control different aspects of your sculpting with the pressure sensitivity. So just something to keep in mind there. All right, so now that we've kind of covered that tangent pinch, let's hop back up here and look at the last couple of brushes that we have. So we've got the flatten brush, which does pretty much exactly what you would think it would, and that's that it flattens out your geometry based on your screen space and then based on whatever the facing direction of your current polygons is. So you see here, as I use this flatten brush back and forth over this surface, it's taking wherever my stroke initiates, and it's creating a kind of a tangential flattening across that surface to give you this nice kind of flattened out look here. So this can be really nice also for adding in some extra detail, as it will allow you to get a little bit more of a hard surface look on your sculpting, and it can be something that's very useful. All right, so moving on here, two more to look at before we continue on, and those are going to be the smudge brush, which, just like in Photoshop, just kind of takes everything underneath it and pushes it along. So just like a smudge brush will do on pixels in Photoshop. And then the move brush, which I find to be very useful on things like characters, where you want to take and adjust the overall positioning of geometry. And what this allows you to do is just take and move stuff, just as the name would imply, but it will take whatever is inside the brush when you click, and that will be the area that gets moved. So see, I clicked and it's centered over this area, and I can move this around, and it's not going to create a continual stroke, but it will allow me to move individual pieces of my mesh. So this can be very nice, as I said, for working something like characters. See here, if I grab this hill, or this kind of blob that I've created, I can definitely kind of take this entire thing and move it around, but I'm just going to be working with what's initially under the brush. So that can be kind of nice for going in and getting a little bit of fine-tuned detail. So the last couple down here are ones that you will use sometimes, but tend to be fairly specific use case based. And those are going to be the spin brush, which does exactly what you would expect. It kind of turns the underlying geometry. Holding control will invert and make it turn clockwise. And of course, like always, you can hold the shift key and use the smooth brush. Now the emboss one, which is the last one that we'll look at here, is best used in conjunction with some specific brushes or image-based brushes, which we'll look at in a moment. And what it does is, in some ways, it's very like the move tool, but it's just going to take the area under the brush, and then it will allow you to kind of raise and lower it as you drag left and right. So you see, as I drag right, it raises that section, drag left, and it drops it back down. Okay, so that's kind of the basic idea there. Now, some things to take into account when you're working with sculpting are the brushes here. So we're going to skip down over a few of these things as we're just going over a basic introduction here and look at our different brush types. So you can see that we have a soft brush, we have a harder brush, very much like Photoshop brushes. So here, let's go over to the push tool so you can see these in action. So there is going to be our soft brush, and the hard brush is just going to give us a kind of more solid stroke. You can see it definitely doesn't have as smooth a fall off. And then you also have a noise brush, which can be extremely useful, especially when you're adding any kind of organic detail, because this is going to give us just a basic kind of fractal noise pattern that then you can go in, and as you brush, it's going to add that kind of detail in with any of the individual brushes that you're using. So right now I'm using this with the push brush, but any other brush can also take advantage of that kind of noise within the brush stroke itself. Okay, so that gives you different types of things that you can do with the brushes. Now, moving down, there are a few more things that are actually hidden right now. And you can see I've got this double arrow right here, which if I click is going to reveal the last few things here. So here we have a nozzle, which will add kind of jitter and variation to the strokes. This is going to be a lot like adding jitter in a Photoshop brush. And then we also have image ink, which if I click and hold actually has several other options. And we can see we've got parametric ink, random ink, and projection ink. So these other ones we'll get into in a later lesson, but for now we can look and have an idea of how image ink works, because these are all going to be fairly similar in how they work. So once I have image ink applied, I'm going to go back and just get a regular soft brush. We can go down here to the bottom, and you can see that we have image ink, and there is an image or a space for an image. And I'm just going to click on this, and by default, it's going to go into an ink folder where there are some preset images, and anything that I choose here is going to allow me to kind of stamp it across the surface. Now, just like these preloaded images, you can also load in any images that you would like. So if you have a folder or an archive of images on your desktop or somewhere on your hard drive, you can click here And up at the top, you can see that you have the option to add path. And then you can add a path to any other part of your system or an online drive or whatever that will allow you to actually take those images and paint with them the same way. So this can be very useful if you have your own specific brushes already. So I'm going to go ahead and just get bricks here. And I'm just going to click out here. And to set up Image Ink, first what you'll need to do is kind of click to enable it. So I'm just going to click off of the mesh here so that I don't start sculpting right off the bat. And when I do that, it's going to drop in the actual image. And now I have some controls over how the image lies on the surface here. So the center circle here will allow me to reposition this texture. The top circle will allow me to rotate it. And the box here on the side will allow me to scale it. So, if I wanted to get kind of a brick texture in here, all I need to do is place this up here. And here, if I click down here, there's some other options as well. You can see we've got pixel blending, which is kind of like some anti-aliasing. And then we also have the option to repeat. So right now it's going to repeat, and it will just tile off of the area and keep going. Now, if you only want to paint something or sculpt something in a specific area, you want to turn repeat off, and then you can just go like that. But for now, I'm going to leave all those on. So I'm going to right click and drag to set my brush size, and then I'm going to start sculpting across the surface here. And you can see, and let's go back over, I'm going to hold the shift key and kind of soften this out because this was a little bit too heavy. But you can see that I'm getting kind of the idea of that brick surface. You can see it has really pulled it very far out, and that's because my offset is just too high for this kind of an Image Ink. So I'm going to move over to an empty area here. And I'm going to take my offset and pull it way down to something like 4% maybe. That's a good one. And that's going to be a percentage, by the way, of the width overall of your brush. So something to keep in mind. With a big brush, that 4% is going to be a lot more than it would be with a smaller brush. So let's go at 4%. And then I'm just going to kind of click and drag across the surface here. And then I'm going to press Q to drop the tool and actually tap Escape as well. You can see even that 4% was probably a little too dense because it's pulling those polygons out pretty far. But you could pretty easily go in here. I'm just going to hold the Shift key and just go in, and with a few clicks I can smooth that back out and kind of soften it a little bit. And again, we're kind of at the resolution limit here with that very fine brick pattern, but you can get the idea here. So with these images, you can actually get a lot of power in your sculpting. So that kind of does it for the basic intro to sculpting. The nice thing about the sculpting workflow here inside of Modo is that you can pretty much just get something and start experimenting. So, take this scene that has just this nice subdivided plane in it, or take and subdivide a ball or something like that, and start playing around with the tools. The best way to learn these in this case is really just to click around and paint and sculpt on something yourself and see how things work out. So that does it for dealing with subdivision surfaces, both modeling them and then how to deal with adding detail, and also here with using multi-resolution meshes for sculpting. That does it for this one. Thanks, and I will see you in the next chapter.